Which one of these should I buy? Everdell or Farshore? Everdell and Farshore are both made by Starling Games. They're basically the same game, so why would you want to buy one or the other, and why are they different games? Everdell and Farshore have basically the same mechanics as far as gameplay is concerned. If you know how to play one or the other, going to the other game is going to take you very little time to get on board. So that's a good thing if you don't want to have to learn a whole bunch of new rules and you want to own both. If you don't care about owning both, then there's very little difference as to which one you should get. As far as complexity of rules, they're the same. They're equally easy to play. However, I will say this, Farshore is way more forgiving. Everdell and Farshore both involve building a city of 15 or so cards. You're limited to that. You have 6 meeples, and those 6 meeples, same for both games, which means you can use those meeples between the two games because they don't really do anything different, except for one of the Everdell expansions, but you can interchange those. So that's kind of a cool plus. If you want to have your little whatever they are in Farshore play over in Everdell land, they can. That's super sweet. Not so much the other way. They would drown. In Everdell, you also have the same requirements of drawing cards, drawing resources, paying for things with resources, and so on and so forth. That doesn't change too much. In Everdell, one of the issues that you would have as a new player is that you find that you can't build anything. You think, I've got only like a few guys, I can get very little stuff in the first season. How am I supposed to build anything? Well, a seasoned Everdell player will see all those free cards that you could get by synergizing 2 cards. Oftentimes you can get like the critter or something for free if you have the prerequisite other thing that it goes with. So you're kind of planning to get a certain card so you can get some other certain card for free. Then you can get more cards that you otherwise couldn't get. And it's very difficult in that first season. You're very tight on resources. In Farshore, they realized that this was a point of like Everdell experts can play well, but newbies can't. So we're going to go easier on the newbies in Farshore. How do they do that? Well, lighten the load on both of those points, resources and card freebieism. In Everdell, you must have the exact right resources to get something, unless you got a card that makes it cheaper. That is in Farshore too. But in Farshore, there's a new resource called Treasure. And Treasure allows you to basically treat it as a wild card. And Treasure keeps popping up. You're going to keep getting Treasure over the course of the game through your play with your ship. So you can use your Treasure as any resource at any time. And that's great. That frees you up. You just stop having to worry about like, oh no, I've got wood, but I needed a berry. Now you've got a treasure and you can use it as a berry. Or you don't have, mushrooms in the case of Farshore. So that's great. That eliminates all of that hassle of never being able to afford what you really need to be able to afford. However, it's a bit of a bait. You see, in Farshore, the treasure is worth 2 victory points, which is fantastic. Except that you're spending it to build stuff. That's a bit of a you choose which you want option there. And you might want to start hoarding treasure as you get more capable to sustain yourself. Another way they simplified things was they eliminated that synergy thing with the cards. So no longer do you have cards that have some other specific card that it pairs up with. Instead, you now have, they do still sort of thematically match up with a paired card, but they're not directly tied with each other anymore. Instead, you get 3 anchors. These 3 anchors can be used at any time to get another critter, a critter specifically, on a building of the same base type. There's, 5 base types, same as in Everdell. You can just plunk your anchor on the building that you've already built of that same type, get a critter of the same type. It doesn't have to be matching that card at all. So that gives you a lot of flexibility that you before didn't have. You would have had to hope that the matching card comes up and that someone else doesn't take it and that you have the right building built in advance and all of that. Now that whole chain of events is not really necessary. So you can just see an opportunity and then you can build your building and then you can hire your critter whenever you think it's necessary. You only get 3 anchors in the whole game, so make them count. I would typically get the most expensive thing with those anchors because you can just not pay any of the cost at all, which is fantastic. But also if you're waiting until the end of the game, to make use of them, also that might hurt you. So using them in the very first season might also be a great way to use them. It's up to you. Some other differences in Everdell and Farshore is, again, back to flexibility and not making things a huge pain in the neck. Everdell has this thing where you have mini quests, where you have to get 2 exact specific cards, or in some of the expansions, some other requirements, and then you could claim that card with a worker, get points, and that's great. For me, that never happened. I could never get the 2 cards that they required to show up in the game at all, or for me to get them. I couldn't even get 1 half the time. I ignored those cards pretty much all the time. And I don't know, that feels like it's a mechanic in the game is just going completely ignored. It didn't hurt me as far as winning or not, but I thought, that part of the game should be more something that people can actually accomplish. And they do improve on that in expansions of Everdell, but still, that feels like a weak part of the game. And Farshore, I don't know, does it one better or worse? So in Farshore, you've got maps. And maps, similar thing, you can claim them with a worker, and they're worth points. But they're very generic. Like, they're completely generic. They don't have any specific requirements like Everdell does, so they lose a bit of their thematicness. They are maps, so that's thematic, but they don't have any charm. They just require you to have a certain number of that type of card in your city, and then you can go claim it. Now, the maps are worth more the more maps you have, so you are incentivized to strategize when you're going to get these maps, because they become less beneficial as you get more of them. So you gotta get in first and fast, but you also don't want to fall behind on building your city so that you can't actually afford to build anything. Up to you, again, how you're gonna play that. But this is yet another example of how Farshore makes things a bit more flexible and a little bit less brain planning ahead of time intensive compared to Everdell. I really like the bit about the boats on the Farshore board. It goes around the edge of the board. It looks like a scoring track, which a little bit is, sort of. You have points from other things, just like Everdell. But the boats move if you play a card that has a type, common or unique, or critter or building, and it matches the current season's type. And those are random for each gameplay. So that adds a bit more of replayability, and it also gives you a different impetus on how you would want to choose which cards to play in your city. Because now that we've given you more flexibility, what you can choose, you don't need to be looking for combos that you used to be able to have to hunt for. Now, the seasonal desires, as it were, are going to tell you, like, oh, play more common critters maybe this turn, this whole round of the season. So that provides a bit more of a push in a certain direction, because that moves your boat along the track, and every step of that track is points. Those are direct points. And also, every time you advance a little bit further, you're going to hit a treasure point, and you're going to get a treasure, which is fantastic. There are cards that give you treasures as well, but advancing your boat is pretty much the main way to get your treasures. And treasures means more flexibility, more money in the bank, and more victory for you. A cool little thing in Farshore that I really, really liked, and when I was playing with new players, I was just waiting for them to discover that this was going to happen. They kind of figured it out on their own, but there's little islands where you can place your workers, similar to the meadow spaces in Everdell. However, in Farshore, the equivalent, those little islands disappear. Some of them disappear when high tide comes in, and I don't really think they come back. So if you've got workers there, it just stops working, and you gotta re-strategize, which is very thematic. Again, it's very clever. I like it. It's cute. As far as components are concerned, they do basically mirror each other. They both have a little stand thing that helps you manage your card deck, because the card deck's a little bit tall. If you've sleeved your cards, good luck keeping them stacked, because they'll slide off each other. So these things actually keep them in place, which is nice. This one's a tiny bit worse and better, because having the 2 sides allows you to put your discards right there as well. Everdell Tree does not have anywhere to put the discards. You gotta stick them at the base of the board. Whatever. But this thing was designed to hold all the quests and stuff, and the workers up here. You're gonna take them off during the game. This thing, there is no way you're gonna get your workers on this thing. We tried a little bit. We perched our little guys a little bit up here. Doesn't much fit at the top. You can try it if you think that's fun, but it doesn't really work, and I don't think that's what it's meant for. So this is not a worker stand. You can do it if you want. If you have more players, then it's just not going to fit, and they're going to fall off. So small difference. Doesn't really affect much of anything. These are the wooden ones. You get paper ones in the real game. Both games have a squishy food-based item that is exclusively used to hire critters. I think in Everdell it mixes things up a bit more, but in Farshore there's a hard cut on the resource usage, so critters will always be exclusively mushrooms. Whereas Everdell, the berries were used a bit more mixed. So it was sometimes a combination of things to hire some of your workers. In Farshore, none of that. It's all, if you're getting mushrooms, that you're aiming for critters. Whereas if you do any of the other resources, they're definitely going to be buildings. And it's basically the same thing. You got seashells and seaweed and sea glass, whereas it complements the stones and the wood and the resin from Everdell. So those are basically one-to-one matches of each other, and you're going to get them in the exact same way. Now, which one would I prefer to play again? Definitely Farshore is easier for newbies, I would say. It's a more flexible, forgiving game, so you don't need to have all the knowledge of the game in advance to be able to play it well. Not that you have to do that in Everdell either. Everdell is really easy to play and enjoyable, but you can get really good at Everdell knowing the cards, whereas that's not as required in Farshore. You can mess up and then recover a bit better in Farshore, I think, than Everdell. Both of them also have single-player versions, so if you like that, you can get right into that. There's Rugwort and Captain Bonnie, the cute, adorable crab in the other game, Farshore. So both of them have single-player versions, and I haven't tried them, but I expect they're well-tested and they're fun. Which one should you buy? Well, I'm going to say that if you don't want to hurt your brain too much, go with Farshore. Also, if you're that kind of person, you're probably not going to be too interested in going deep on the game. So if you're the kind of person that likes playing a game, getting good at that game, and then sticking with it, Farshore is a good choice. If you're the kind of person that plays a game, likes it, and you want more, like you want much more, you become ravenous, and you just want to add to it, then you have got to get Everdell. Because Everdell has at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, how many expansions this is. You can go far with Everdell. The board just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and there are more and more meeples, and there are more and more rules, and you can just change and mix and match these. You don't play with them all at the same time unless you want to go insane. There's a meta expansion. It's just, there's so much more you can add to Everdell. More cards, there's abilities for the individual meeples that make them different. There's just so much. So if you want to take the game further and expand it beyond your wildest dreams or manageability, get Everdell. If you're happy to be just the one and done game of Farshore, which has been promised by Starling Games, that they're not going to be constantly expanding this one, then get this one. You can be sure, well, hopefully sure, that it's not going to get any expansions. It is an island, so it can't really grow anywhere unless they want to add an ocean map, which that would be so cool. They could have fish and octopus and I wish they would do that. I really want an underwater expansion. They're not going to do that. They've said maybe. I hope they break that promise. Everdell, get Everdell if you want to buy a whole bunch of stuff. If you want to have an epic ton of meeples of different species, get Everdell. If you just want to buy the one simple game, play it and enjoy it, get Farshore. They are sufficiently similar that you will not be making a mistake if you get one or the other. It's not one of those kind of decisions. Just know what kind of person you are. Look at your game shelf. If you've got tons of expansions for your games, you want Everdell. If you have, like, I don't know, Risk, but no expansions, or Catan, but no expansions, and it's been years, then Farshore is definitely probably what you would want. That's my take on it. You've got to obey me. And this has been Everdell and Farshore. See you guys next time.